إن الحمد لله نحمده تعالى ونستعينه ونستهديه. نعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له. وأشهد أن سيدنا محمدا عبده ورسوله. بلغ الرسالة وأدى الأمانة ونصح للأمة وجاهد في الله حق جهاده. وارض اللهم عن الصحابة والتابعين وتابعيهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Allah Azza wa Jal says in Surah An-Nahl, loosely translated the bee, and yet Shaykh Hanuti rahimahullah, when he gave us the tafsir of Surah An-Nahl, he said the word Nahl has another meaning. When you bestow a gift onto somebody, the verb used for that is nahalahu. He gave him a gift. So gifting is also called a nahl. So when you read Surah An-Nahl, it's all gifts, including the bees and the honey and all of that. So the narrow meaning of Surah An-Nahl has to do with bees. But the Nahl in general is a much bigger. It's gifts from Allah Azza wa Jal that includes the bees and the honey and everything else. So that's just a sidebar. In Surah An-Nahl, there is an interesting ayah. A'udhu billahi min shaitan rajim. Ayah 97. The Surah An-Nahl is Surah 16. Ayah 97. Allah Azza wa Jal says, من عمل صالحا من ذكر أو أنثى وهو مؤمن فلنحيينه حياة طيبة وَلَنَجْزِيَنَّهُمْ أَجْرَهُمْ بِأَحْسَنِ مَا كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ. This ayah talks about happiness, happy life. And we hear people talk a lot about happiness. We just spent a whole month hearing people wishing each other a happy life, happy new year, happy new year, happy new year. And wallahi, I wish I could stop somebody and say, what does that mean? And I would be really interested to hear what people have to say. What is their concept or conception of happiness? But that's another topic and another issue. What's most important is, what does the Quran tell us about happiness? So Allah Azza wa Jalla in this ayah very simply says, if you do good deeds, male or female, من عمل صالحا من ذكر أو أنثى, male or female, no difference. وهو مؤمن, as a believer, or while believing. Now, while believing is translated here by different mufassirin as being while having faith. And faith here is referring to faith in Allah and as in Iman. But I believe that there's another dimension here that the scholars did not mention. Only Mohammad Abbasi touched on it. He said, a believer withal. Withal means whilst he is believing, or believing in what he is doing. So basically, that those who do good deeds, while they are believing, definitely believing in Allah, but there is also while they're believing in what they're doing. And that's my humble addition. In other words, you can't be working on a project with half a heart, not believing in what you're doing. Even if you believe in Allah Azza wa Jalla, if you're doing something while you're not believing in its effectiveness or efficacy, you'll probably fail. Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab, when he spoke about al-amal al-salih, he used to say amal al-salih means that it's for a good intention, but it also means that you do it correctly. And that's the other dimension of this ayah. وَهُوَ مُؤْمِنٌ means believing while believing in Allah, but also means while believing in what He's doing. In other words, you have to know what you're talking about or what you're doing. Allah Azza wa Jal says, for those people, we shall give them a pleasant life. حَيَاةً طَيِّبَةً. Ya akhwa, the word طَيِّبَة is beyond pleasurable. Because you may be having pleasures, but at the same time really not tasting it. How many times do you hear people saying, wallahi, we eat and it's like food has no taste? Or you hear them saying, I went to vacation, I came back feeling like I need a vacation. People are spending money to attain this thing that the Quran calls hayatan tayyibah, but they are unable to attain it. And that's another topic, but I just wanted to explain that when Allah says hayatan tayyibah, it's beyond pleasure. It's beyond pleasant feelings. It is a satisfaction, a feeling of satisfaction that is hard to describe. Because sometimes you do something and you feel in your heart that you did a good job. And then Allah says, وَلَنَجْزِيَنَّهُمْ أَجْرَهُمْ بِأَحْسَنِ مَا كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ. They will get their reward. Now here it could be the reward in the akhirah, but also it could be the reward in the dunya, because what is a better feeling than to do something and feel that it was accomplished correctly? Why do I bring up this subject? Because there's another ayah in the Quran that really explains how most people feel most of the time. And that ayah is in the beginning of Surah Al-Balad. Balad translated the city. It's a small surah in the 30th chapter where Allah Azza wa Jal says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم لا أقسم بهذا البلد وأنت حل بهذا البلد ووالد وما ولد لقد خلقنا الإنسان في كبد. Allah Azza wa Jal swears and He calls to witness the balad, the city in which the Prophet was sallallahu alaihi wasallam. وَوَالِدٍ وَمَا وَلَدٍ, calls to witness parents and children. In other words, everyone. And Allah Azza wa Jal says, لَقَدْ, verily we created man in hardship. Hardship, ya akhwa, is part of our creation, is part of our existence. Allah Azza wa Jal says that. I heard somebody say once, man is either going into crisis or coming out of crisis. Subhanallah. And it's not hard to see that. Just look around. As I'm speaking to you, within the last 24 hours, we've seen more than 500,000 of our brothers and sisters in northern Syria on the move again. Entire families wiped out. Wallahi, one brother that I know, a doctor, a heart surgeon from here, from Florida, he happens to be there, and I'm in contact with him. He sent me a video that I believe he shot it himself, of a man that was asked, a young man, he's in his 30s, where's your family? And he says, they're all under the rubble. His wife, his children. And then in the clip, a little bit later on, they show you him carrying his children, his 2 daughters, his son, right there in front of him, lining them up. He says, I was trying to take them to a place where they could be safe. Allah took them to His safety. More than 500,000 people are on the run. No shelter, no tents, no food. The international agencies are unable to cope. So while that's happening, and by the way, this is a sidebar. If you think there's nothing I can do about that, you are wrong. And I'll prove to you in a second using the example of China. If you really, really want to help, $100 buys a tent and can give shelter to an entire family for $100. Wallahi, you can't have dinner for $100. If you and your wife went out to dinner, $100 is probably not enough. And yet it can put a shelter over somebody's head in the winter. This is not a fundraising, I'm just bringing, and you probably say, who would I give it to? I know the head of an organization called Mercy Without Limits, Brother Muhammad Nasser. I know him personally from Kansas City. He is right there right now on the Turkish border, buying tents and distributing tents. But as we say in Arabic, اتسع الخرق على الراقع. The hole is bigger than the garment. The hole is bigger than the garment. But it doesn't mean we can't do anything. And the proof, ya ikhwa, that we need to do something. And Allah Azza wa Jal will put the barakah. You just do your job and leave the rest to Allah Azza wa Jal. The past few months, we've been talking about another hardship, another situation. The situation of our brothers and sisters in the Uyghurs in China, who correctly, by the way, should be called the East Turkestan brothers, because, as I mentioned in the last khutbah, it was a Muslim country called East Turkestan that was occupied in 1947 by China. It was annexed and it was added to China. And they talk about it as if it's a Chinese province. It's really a Muslim country that was absorbed into China. Those people are in concentration camps. And we raised our hands and he said, Ya Allah. And they raised their hand and he said, Ya Allah, give us some relief. And some of us went around saying, boycott all these filthy Chinese products. Stop buying this garbage made in China. And sometimes it's hard. I wanted to buy my father a toaster. I went through 15 toasters at Walmart, couldn't find one that's not made in China. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. I needed to buy it. I had to. But I was obligated. But then you go buy socks and there is 20 made by China and then there's one from Vietnam or Cambodia or Egypt or Turkey. Buy that one even if you have to pay double. We were saying that. And people were saying, you mean to tell me you're going to make a dent in the Chinese economy by boycotting their garbage products? And I said, I may not make a dent, but Rabbil Alameen will, and he did. Their losses from the coronavirus that's caused by them eating bats and dogs and snakes and rats and mice, it's all on YouTube. And they eat them while they are alive. They don't even wait for them to die. Ya ikhwa, they are sitting there chopping meat from living animals and eating them. The coronavirus is the least they should suffer. $400 billion, their losses since the outbreak. Now don't tell me you cannot boycott when the collective will of the ummah says, Ya Allah, take care of our brothers over there. They incarcerated 3 million of our brothers. Rabbil Alameen incarcerated their entire country. The whole world now is saying, if you're Chinese, stay away. They are sealed all over the world. That's Rabbil Alameen in action. That's the will of Allah. But it all starts, Allah Azza wa Jalla enacts His will through our actions. We can't wait for Rabbil Alameen to do something. We have to do what we have to do. I'll give an example later on of how Allah Azza wa Jalla puts barakah. So this is basically part of the subject. Another part of the subject, I've been attending a lot of janazas lately of many of our younger brothers. There's too many coronaries, too many failing hearts. And I believe, ya ikhwa, there's something we can do about it. We can visit our kitchens and start modifying our cooking habits. Let's cut the ghee and the butter and the oil and the sugar and the salt. Dr. Ahmed Al-Qadi, rahimahullah, one of the greatest heart doctors in this country. He passed away. He used to talk about the 4 white poisons: refined sugar, salt, flour, all of these things that did not exist in the 1800s, and there were no heart diseases in the 1800s. Only after all these productions were made and after the 1800s that all these diseases became known. A lot of things we can do, but we need to have the niyyah to do the right thing, and Allah Azza wa Jal will put the barakah in our actions. So what is the problem? The problem, ya akhwa, is that in most things that we do what I like to call, and my son and my nephew will attest to this, the entrepreneurial style of doing things. In other words, we do what feels comfortable, what feels easy, what comes naturally, what doesn't require any hard work or any planning or any willpower. That's what we do. We eat whatever is available. We do whatever is available. Instead of saying, this may clog my heart and may give me a heart attack in my 30s or in my 40s. Thank you very much, I'll eat something else. We eat whatever is available. It's very, very easy for us to also use an excuse of this would not make a difference. This excuse, I wish I can find a name for it, but the Quran gave it a name. Allah Azza wa Jal says in one ayah in the Quran, describing Al-Walid ibn Mughira, who listened to the Prophet ﷺ recite the Quran, and he fell in love with the Quran. So it touched his heart, he walked away. As he walked away, he balked. It's like he was hit with a rock, and he stopped. And of course, he went back to shirk, and we know the rest of the story. But the Quran described that ayah, that situation with one ayah. وَأَعْطَى قَلِيلًا وَأَكْدَى. That he gave in a little bit, and then he balked. Many of us, this applies to many of us. We give a little, maybe $100 to Kashmir, And then we stop. What is the $100 going to do for Kashmir? What is $200 going to do for Syria? Ya akhi, leave it to Rabbil Alameen. Don't you believe in this thing called barakah? And I'll show you in a moment what barakah means and how it actually could show up in our life if we were to believe and to have the right niyyah. Don't be like Al-Walid ibn al-Mughira, أعطى قليلا, and gave a little bit and bulked. Why? Because shaitan came to him. Because the ayah after it talks about shaitan. استعاذة من الشيطان. So Allah Azza wa Jal, so what is the response? Ya akhwa, the response is we cannot live an entrepreneurial life, one that just follows whatever is easy, whatever is available, whatever comes naturally. We have to live a life on purpose. I actually put together a course that I've been teaching for 20 years on this topic, living life on purpose. And it's guided by the ayah that says, أَمْ حَسِبْتُمْ أَنَّمَا خَلَقْنَاكُمْ عَبَثًا وَأَنَّكُمْ إِلَيْنَا لَا تُرْجَعُونَ فَتَعَالَى اللَّهُ الْمَلِكُ الْحَقِّ. Ya ikhwa, this ayah says basically, do you think that we created you in vain or for in idle play? Allah Azza wa Jal created us for a purpose and to live a life on purpose. So I spent entire month of December talking about the need to start the new year with a plan to change for the better, to check our values, to try to check our beliefs about our values, to try to focus, to try to do something to change our lives. And this is just a follow-up. So Rabbil Alameen says, you are not created in idle play. Then what do we do? I am somebody who doesn't like to present a problem without presenting a solution. And I always say, if I gave you a problem without giving you a solution, I'll depress the heck out of you and you'll probably walk away hating me and hating my khutbah. I always like to give a light at the end of the tunnel on how to find a solution. And the solution that I'm going to present today, I will back it up with examples from the Quran and the Sunnah, in which Allah Azza wa Jal tells us how to do about this. But what is the significance of having a solution for our problems? The significance is very simple, ya akhwa. It's stated in the Quran. Allah says, "Kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat lin-nas." Are we khayra ummah ukhrijat lin-nas? Are we the best ummah extracted for mankind? We're not. So there's got to be something missing in our lives, in our daily lives, in our behavior. So that is the significance, is that if we do things right, Allah will put the barakah, and we will become khayra ummatin ukhrijat lin-nas bi'idhnillah. So what are the steps? The first one, we are too distracted, ya akhwa. We need to focus. Whatever situation we have that we're in that needs a solution, needs extreme focus. We cannot be distracted. We cannot have the TV glaring while we are trying to get something done, while we're listening to one conversation in the right ear and one in the left ear. This is not focus. The Prophet ﷺ very clearly prohibited that. In one hadith that was narrated by Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, وصححه الألباني. It was narrated in Ibn Majah. And Imam al-Albani considered it a hadith sahih. He's a 20th century musahih. The Prophet ﷺ says the following. Pay attention. من جعل الهموم هما واحدا. Anyone who reduces his worries. Ham is a major worry. من جعل الهموم هما واحدا هم آخرته كفاه الله هم الدنيا أو هم دنيا ومن تشعبت به همومه لا يبالي الله في أي واد هلك. Prophet ﷺ says, anyone who channels his worries into one worry. Notice what I'm saying. Channels his worries into one worry. That is to please Allah Azza wa Jal. A solution that doesn't please Allah and that angers Rabbil Alameen is not a solution. This ayah very clear, this hadith very clearly says that everything you want to do has to be channeled through the Shar'i method. It has to be correct. It has to be acceptable fi dinillah. You cannot have shortcuts. So the Prophet ﷺ says, Hamma akhirati. It doesn't mean that you stay home, lock the door, and pray 24 hours a day. That's not what this hadith means. It means channel it through the approved ways of Allah Azza wa Jalla and the Prophet ﷺ. Only then you'll see the results you're looking for. That's the real ham. is how would I please Allah if I did this or that or the other thing. هم آخرته كفاه الله هموم الدنيا هم الدنيا ومن تشعبت. Notice the word تشعب means branched out. شعبة means branch. ومن تشعبت به همومه في أحوال الدنيا لم يبال الله في أي أوديتها لك. Allah could care less in what valley he perishes. He has no value in the eyes of Allah Azza wa Jal. So that's the first step, is to focus and to stop getting distracted. The second, ya akhwa, we need to know that there's always options. There's always options. Don't get stuck on one way of doing things. Don't eat the same food because your mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother has been cooking the same exact way. I give an example that may make some Palestinians here laugh. But we Palestinians have this thing called maklube, which is a classic dish. There's another one called mansaf, but I'm talking about maklube here today. The maklube is made with fried stuff, fried cauliflower, fried eggplants, fried everything. But you have another option. And that's what I'm talking about. The other option is to bake the eggplants and the cauliflower. Now all of a sudden it's healthier, not healthy yet, because it's got rice and other things, but at least it's healthier. That's an option. There are people that are not willing to consider another option. To cut the ghee in the biryani and in the curried chicken and beef and everything else for our own health, for our own sake. Ya ikhwa, when you get sick, your entire family suffers. There are some people who want to be martyrs. It's like, yeah, I don't care if I die tomorrow, it's okay, I'm anxious to meet Allah Azza wa Jal. Really? But your family is not anxious for you to meet Allah Azza wa Jal yet, because they love you and they care about you. If you're suicidal and you want to die by coronary, by biryani, is this really what your family wants? Is this what Allah Azza wa Jal wants? Wants us to suicide slowly? And since we are on this topic of suicide, last week I was in Columbus, Ohio, and I was supposed to give a khutbah in the largest masjid, a masjid that cost $7 million. 2 khutbahs back to back. And in the last minute it was canceled. I was already there. I said, what happened? They said a young 19-year-old man died by suicide. So now the regular imam of the community, who is very well known there, had to give the khutbah to explain about mental health and so on and so forth. When I dug up a little bit into the story, Brother Muhammad Ali Mukandar is here. He knows his relatives live there and he can verify the story. When I dug up, I found out that it's a young man whose parents are pushing him through medical school and who was not doing good. And that's how he ended it. وَلَا حَوْلَ وَلَا قُوَّةَ إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ. Ya akhwa, success is important, but success shouldn't have us lose our children. There's a limit to how much we can push our children. And some of them are here. I hope and pray to Allah Azza wa Jal to help them in their endeavors. But I also hope and pray that the parents will heed my advice and will go gently on their children. That's a heavy price to pay for a child to be a doctor. Anyway, so going back to the issue of options. We have options, ya ikhwa. And here's the example. Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam in the Battle of Badr, he had an option what to do before the battle started. And the Sahaba told him, Ya Rasulullah, instead of camping here, let's camp there. And that made a difference. Prophet ﷺ looked at different options for where to camp and which one is more strategic than the other. A bigger example, which I'll explain later, is that digging the trench. Prophet ﷺ had a majlis shura. He sat down and all of the Sahaba, Aws, Khazraj, everybody was there. And Suhaib al-Rumi, and Salman al-Farisi. Nobody was excluded. And Salman radiallahu anhu said, Ya Rasulullah, we used to dig a ditch when we found ourselves in a tight spot like this. And you all know the rest of the story. You know the general story, but you don't know the details. I'll leave that to the end, inshallah. So there's many examples. And Aisha radiallahu anha explained that in one hadith. She said radiallahu anha, ما خير رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم بين أمرين إلا اختار أيسرهما. Anytime the Prophet was given a choice between different options, he chose the easiest choice. As long as there's no ithm in it, that there's no haram in it. ما لم يكن إثما. She said, as long as it's not ithm, is not forbidden or haram. فإن كان إثما كان أبعد الناس. يعني if it was the wrong way, he was the furthest away from it. صلى الله عليه وسلم. So in other words, the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم had choices. And he made sure to choose the most appropriate choice. Well, many times we focus on a problem and then we get stuck on one way of solving it, not realizing that there is another way. Many years ago, I read a book called Q2, Quantum 2 or something, a small little tiny book that gives the example of people like that. It gives an example, Ajalakumullah, of a fly flying into a glass pane, not realizing that all that fly had to do is to turn in the other direction and there is vast space for her to fly. And yet that same fly keeps hitting the same glass pane until she drops dead. There are people that live their life like that, constantly hitting against the wall instead of realizing that there are options. And most of the times when you don't know that you have options, ask. Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, the ayah actually in the Quran says, فَاسْأَلْ بِهِ خَبِيرًا. Seek consultation. Ask somebody who's got experience, somebody who knows, somebody who's been there. And that leads me to the third part of the solution, which is to find a model. The word model means an example of how it was done. Back to the example of Al-Khandaq. Who did the ditch? It was the Persians. It didn't matter that Persia was a Kafir country. It didn't matter that they were not Muslims. But they had wise ways of dealing with enemies. They had centuries of experience. And that was one model that the Prophet ﷺ was willing to listen to. But he didn't stop there. He also figured out the system that he needed to do to accomplish that. He did the calculation, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, with the Sahaba. He did the calculation. It was deemed that every 10 Sahaba were in charge of a ditch that is 40 yards long. But it was also, that same ditch was 15 to 30 feet wide, and it was 15 feet deep. There was a system. He didn't, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, stand there and say, Ya Allah, help us dig a ditch. He did the math, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And Nabi al-Ummi, he figured it all out. And it was done in 2 weeks. It was done in 2 weeks. Pray to Allah to accept our efforts, inshallah. I'll finish the rest after the dua. Alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. If you did the math, in this example of Al-Khandaq, which we should learn from, you find that the total volume of dirt, not counting the rocks that had to be removed, and you can go see for yourself. First of all, the length of the trench was 12.5 kilometers, which comes out to about, I believe, 7.5 miles. I did the math. The amount of dirt that was removed was 300,000 cubic meters, which comes out to 10.5 million cubic feet. When you do the math, if the Sahaba, there were 3,000 Sahaba, if the 3,000 Sahaba worked around the clock, each one of them removing 200 cubic feet of dirt per day, the math doesn't work. It's way beyond that. There's no way that the 3,000 Sahaba could have done it without the help of Rabbil Alameen. Without Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam striking a rock and saying, Allahu Akbar, kharibat Khaybar, Allahu Akbar, futihat Roma, Allahu Akbar. It was the help of Allah Azza wa Jal. This example, ya akhwa, when you look at it and you see how it was done, and many, many other examples, you see that it wouldn't have been done if it wasn't for some accountability. The Prophet ﷺ was there. He was digging with them. He ﷺ participated like any one of those men. He didn't hide in his tent and wait for them to get the job done. So not only was he supervising, but he was also part of the whole thing. When you see how Allah Azza wa Jal put the barakah, in this and many other examples you read about in the seerah, then who can dare say, what would my $100 donation to 500,000 refugees do? It's not up to you or up to me. It is up to Rabbil Alameen to put the barakah in whatever we do. It is not up to us to decide whether boycotting a $2 item from Amazon made in China will work or not. Allah Azza wa Jal will make sure it works. And we see an example right in front of us, ya ikhwa. China went from a predator and oppressor nation that has incarcerated 3 million of its inhabitants for no reason, except that they say, Rabbuna Allah. No other reason. Wallahi, when you see them crying and praying to Allah Azza wa Jal, it breaks your heart. For sure, these people have no one on their side. The whole world is not paying attention to what's going to them. But اتق دعوة المظلوم فإنه ليس بينها وبين الله حجاب. Prophet ﷺ says, be aware, be wary of the supplication of somebody who is oppressed, who is a madloom. There is no shield between that dua and between Rabbil Alameen. Go straight to Allah Azza wa Jal. Straight to Allah. And Allah accepted their dua. And now we see China struggling and suffering, and we don't see the end of it. 2,000 cases a day are being diagnosed. 2,000 a day. The whole world now is closing its borders on China. Now, instead of them imprisoning 3 million brothers, the 3 million brothers, through the act of Allah Azza wa Jal, are imprisoning the 2 billion Chinese. And may Allah Azza wa Jal punish them for what they did to our Muslim brothers even more. And may Allah Azza wa Jal save us from affliction, from the coronavirus, and from any other disease, inshallah. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم فيا فوز المستغفرين. اللهم من أراد بالإسلام والمسلمين خيرا فوفقه إلى كل خير، ومن أراد بالإسلام والمسلمين سوءا فأخذه أخذ عزيز مقتدر. عباد الله، إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. اذكروا الله يذكركم واستغفروه يغفر لكم. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله.